Hello, today we're going to be having a look at Sonic Dream Team on Apple Arcade. I predict that not many people will watch this video, and that's okay. I made this video more for me than for you because I just think this game's kind of cool. So yeah, enjoy if you do watch. Before we get into this, it's worth looking at the supported devices. Sonic Dream Team runs on so many Apple devices out there. Dream Team is a 3D action platformer that takes me back to the glory days of 2000's 3D platformer video games. It's also just a huge win for Apple Arcade. It's one of the most exciting games we've had on arcade in quite a while. It has great music, fun platforming, unique bosses, stylized cartoon graphics, and a difficulty that isn't overwhelming, instead rewarding, but can still make your heart race in later levels. The story is about evil Dr. Eggman who has discovered the Reverie, an ancient device with the power to manifest dreams in the real world. Join Sonic and friends as they navigate twisted dreamscapes, rescue their friends, and put a stop to Dr. Eggman's quest for world domination. Along your journey, you will be tested by a few bosses, Dr. Crabulus, Factory Foreman, and Guardian Hunter, until you finally face Eggman. There are currently 6 playable characters: Knuckles, Rouge, Amy, Sonic, Tails, and Cream. Each offer unique abilities like gliding, dashing, or flying, and these abilities will be required to complete particular worlds or access certain areas of a map or a level. These worlds include Scrambled Shores, Dream Factory, Nightmare Maze, and Ego City. How are the touch controls for Sonic Dream Team? As good as can be expected. You have on-screen buttons for jumping, going fast, and interacting with objects and enemies. There is a control stick for moving around, and you can look around moving your finger on the screen. You can also go into controls and change some settings, and you can customize the whole layout. It's as good as can be expected, but for a 3D platformer, touch controls can be quite awkward for timing your movement when grinding or when attacking or targeting objects. Often I would completely miss timing things. Playing with a controller is strongly recommended for this game. As with all original Apple Arcade games, Sonic Dream Team has full controller support on iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, and Mac. It's great on Apple TV, providing an experience just like console, or with a backbone controller on iPhone. It's like playing with a portable Switch. It's a massive shame though that the game has no controller rumble support. It's a small feature, I know, but it would have been such a game changer here. It would have been great if the controller vibrated when collecting items, attacking bosses and enemies, grinding on rails especially, or when taking damage. There is also no mouse and keyboard support on iPad, while obviously it is available for the Mac version. Arguably, the game is easier with a controller over mouse and keyboard, but it would have still been great if it was included on iPad. With Sonic Dream Team, you can access your gameplay data on all of your devices thanks to iCloud Backup. This is a highly overlooked feature that all games on Apple Arcade support. It's really cool being able to drop out of the game on, let's say, an iPhone and pick up in the same spot on an iPad. Unlike a few arcade games, Sonic Dream Team has graphics quality options. Based on my testing though, it looks like devices with an A11 Bionic chip or lower do not have access to these options, except for the A10X iPad Pro and Apple TV 4K First Gen. Graphics quality lets you change how the graphics look on your device. It's pretty self-explanatory. From very low, which also targets 30 FPS, then low, which also targets 30 FPS, medium, high, and very high. I really want a separate option to change the FPS value with options like 30, 60, 120, and so on. I think this would be really good. Resolution scale allows you to raise and lower the internal resolution from 0.5 up to 1. For example, on an Apple TV 4K, it has a max resolution of 3840 by 2160 4K. So you can see on screen now how different resolution scale options will affect the internal resolution. The Mac version also has these two options, which is stupid. I was hoping to see more advanced options like manual resolution especially, FPS targets, and more advanced graphical options. Alright, now it's time to see how the game performs across a range of Apple devices. Before we get into this, it's worth noting Sega have provided me with a test flight build of Sonic Dream Team, which allows me to utilize the Metal Performance HUD. First, let's dive into the iPhone performance. Our first iPhone to look at is the iPhone 15 Pro, powered by A17 Pro. If you're worried if Dream Team throttles the phone, causing the FPS to tank, in my playtime this wasn't the case. Regardless, this isn't a challenging Unity game to run. Here is testing very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution, 2556 by 1179. After a 20-minute test, the FPS stayed to 60, with some micro-stuttering in challenging scenes. However, most of you should not notice this on your device, and it doesn't happen too often. In this state, the phone reached a max temperature of 46 degrees, and after 20 minutes the battery went from 100% to 91%. Sega said in an interview with Touch Arcade that they do have an experimental branch which runs at 120 Hz, but there's still some bugs to work out to make sure the physics plays nicely at that speed. They'll try and add it in the future. Next is the iPhone XR, powered by the A12 Bionic. I was a little bit worried for this device because of its age and pretty weak chip these days, but it performs perfectly fine really. Here is very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution, 1792 by 828. After a 20-minute test, the FPS mostly stayed to 60, especially in the first two worlds. But some micro-stuttering did occur, and the FPS did drop down to 40 in a few challenging scenes within Nightmare Maze and especially in Ego City. In this state, the phone reached a max temperature of 40 degrees, and after 20 minutes, the battery went down from 100% to 91%. I also tried the game in medium settings, but the FPS issues were still apparent, so you may as well play at very high graphics. Up next is the iPhone 8 Plus, powered by the A11 Bionic chip. On this iPhone, the game is locked to 30 FPS, and the graphics quality options are locked too. If I was to guess, it looks like it's running at low graphics with a 0.5 resolution scale. I'd say Sega have locked off this device and many older devices to avoid thermal throttling, and because of these old chips. The game sees a practically locked 30 FPS though for me, with some very minor micro-stuttering. If you're playing on the device itself, you won't really notice the low graphics, but the low frame rate might not be for some, and I found for me it can make timing actions in this game rather challenging. The phone reached a max temperature of only 34 degrees with this game, and after 20 minutes, the battery went from 100% to 88%. Our last iPhone to look at is the very old iPhone SE, powered by the A9 chip. It's worth noting the performance HUD is not supported for this device, so I'm using external FPS capture software to measure the FPS. On this iPhone, the game is locked to 30 FPS, and the graphics quality options are locked too. If I was to guess, it looks like it's running at very low graphics, with a 0.5 resolution scale. It looks disgusting, blown up to 4K in this video. But I'll say this, if you're actually playing on this device, it's not bad due to the really tiny display. It's just that 30 FPS isn't ideal for this game, and it's not really a locked 30 FPS either. There were some stutters and some big FPS drops in a few scenes. The display is also really small, so it can be quite difficult to see what is going on, for me at least. I don't think Sega should have supported devices this old, but I guess they have done this so more people can play the game. Now it's time to look at the iPad performance. Up first is the iPad Pro 11-inch 3rd gen powered by Apple M1. Obviously this game is a breeze on iPad Pro. Here is testing very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution, 2388 by 1668. After a 20-minute test, the FPS stayed to 60. As I reported before, Sega said in an interview with Touch Arcade that they do have an experimental branch which runs at 120Hz. So hopefully they can add this in the future, but they do have some bugs that they have to work out before they can do it. In this state, the iPad reached a max temperature of only 36 degrees, and after 20 minutes the battery went from 100% to 94%. Next is the iPad 10th gen, powered by A14 Bionic. Here is testing very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution, 2360 by 1640. After a 20-minute test, the average FPS was 60. However, I did notice one scene in the game where it would drop down to the low 50s for a few seconds. This only happened once in my playtime, and I couldn't get it to happen again, so I don't see any real reason to lower the settings here. In this state, the iPad reached a max temperature of only 30 degrees, and after 20 minutes the battery went from 100% to 94%. Our last iPad to look at is the very old iPad Air 2, powered by the A8X chip. It's worth noting the performance HUD is not supported for this device, so I'm using external FPS capture software to measure the FPS. On this iPad, the game is locked to 30 FPS, and the graphics quality options are locked too. If I was to guess, it looks like it's running at very low graphics with a 0.5 resolution scale. It doesn't look amazing, even kind of in person, as it has a fairly large display so you can notice it. I wouldn't really suggest playing it on this device, but you also have to give it some slack. This thing is almost 10 years old, so you can't really expect it to run that well here. Again, I don't think Sega should have supported devices this old, but I guess they have done it so more people can try the game, even with sacrifices. Moving on, let's see how the game runs on Apple TV. First, the newest Apple TV 4K 3rd gen, powered by the A15 Bionic chip. Here is testing very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution, 3840 by 2160, 4K. The FPS is not a locked 60 in this state. In fact, it can go down into the low 40s frequently, and later on in the game, down to 30 FPS. But I would say this is due to heavy thermal throttling when it goes down to 30 FPS. This Apple TV reached a max temperature of 51 degrees. Insanely hot. Sadly, this device is not capable of achieving 60 FPS at a resolution scale of 1, or 4K for Dream Team. Even if it had a fan, I don't think it would hit 60. Here is a comparison between medium and very high graphics at a resolution scale of 1, or 4K, and there is almost no difference. If you want a locked 60 FPS on this machine, I suggest still playing at very high graphics, but put the resolution scale to 0.5. This means the resolution is upscaled from 1920 by 1080 to an output resolution of 3840 by 2160. Next is the Apple TV 4K first gen, powered by the A10X Fusion chip. Here is testing very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution, 3840 by 2160, or 4K. The FPS is anywhere from below 30 up to 40 or so FPS. This is not a 4K gaming machine, even the newest model, but it's kind of cool that it's even possible in this state. It's also interesting to note the max temperature at max settings here was about 40 degrees. Unlike the latest Apple TV, the first and second gen Apple TV 4K have a fan, so much better cooling occurs, 40 degrees here over 51 degrees on the Apple TV 4K third gen. Anyway, if you want 60 FPS on this machine, I suggest still playing at very high graphics, but put the resolution scale to 0.5. This means the resolution is upscaled from 1920 by 1080 to an output resolution of 3840 by 2160. The only time it struggles a tiny bit is during Ego City, going into the low 50s. You're not going to notice this with the naked eye though, and it doesn't warrant lowering the graphical settings. Our last Apple TV to look at is the Apple TV HD, powered by the terrible A8 chip. This is actually the weakest device supported for Dream Team, so how does it perform? The game is locked to 30 FPS, and the graphics quality options are locked too. If I was to guess, it looks like it's running at very low graphics with 0.5 resolution scaling. It doesn't look great, and there are noticeable frame pacing issues with the 30 FPS target. There are many scenes where the game is completely unplayable. It's not worth playing the game here, obviously, but it's kind of cool to see it actually runs in the first place on such an old chip, and I imagine that a lot of people who own an Apple TV still have this device. Now, let's see how the game runs on an Apple Silicon Mac. Here is a 13-inch MacBook Pro powered by Apple M1. Here is testing very high graphics and a resolution scale of 1, which plays the game at native resolution on my external monitor, 3840 by 2160, or 4K. It's a locked 60 FPS throughout gameplay. My Mac reached a max temperature of only 38 degrees, and after 20 minutes the battery went from 100% to 89%. There's really not much else to say. The game runs fine here, as we all expected. This is the weakest Apple Silicon chip, so you can obviously expect it to run great on every other Apple Silicon Mac out there. So yeah. So, what are we thinking? This video was kind of weird. It was like a performance video, and then it was also a bit about the game, and then I don't really know what this video is. I just thought that Sonic Dream Team was, it's a pretty good win for Apple Arcade. And there is the exclusivity thing that a lot of people don't like, and I'm not really going to go into that, but you know, this thing is supported on so many devices out there. If you really want to play the game, you've got a lot of options. And who knows, maybe one day this game will come outside of Apple Arcade. I don't know. But if you're an Apple Arcade gamer already in the subscription service, I think you're going to have a pretty good time with this game. A good platformer. And I never played any of the other Sonic games really, but so I don't have anything to compare it to. But I just would like to let you know that I had fun with it. And it's not the most in-depth game out there, and it definitely needs some more content. But that is coming apparently. But it's just a good, nice arcade game to play. And I hope that Apple Arcade and Apple can bring more games like this to the service, because this is what I'm looking for with arcade. You know, I'm not looking for huge AAA big budget games that I'm not looking for that really. I'm just looking for nice indie games that are just fresh and unique and do something different on mobile, kind of, you know? Yeah? I don't know what this video is. Check out Sonic Dream Team if you want, or not.